Welcome to the Motivitystate Podcast, the space where we dive into mobility, movement, biomechanics, neurology, and much, much more. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Motivitystate Podcast. Today, our guest is Helen Hall. I will share a couple of sentences about how I know her, and then I'll let her introduce herself, just as we normally do in the beginning of the podcast. So I found out about Helen and her work by the Anatomy in Motion platform and their forum because she is a running coach, and at one point I decided to run a marathon, and then her work came in handy because I read her book, and it helped me quite a lot to focus. Yes, even with your shoes on. We'll go into that a little bit later. So that book helped me quite a lot, and I had a few chats with her through the process and before the marathon. And I believe that it's very important and to address certain topics that Helen is an expert on. So I'll let her introduce herself, and then I'll start asking the questions.
Okay, great. I love the questions bit and I hate the introduction bit. I never know what to say. I know me. You said my name already. I do. I look after runners. I help people in pain. I'm sat next to the most advanced gait analysis tech in the world. There are only 3 machines of its kind in the world. Nike has one. There's another one in Munich, and I have the third. So I analyze posture and movement. I'm fascinated by movement. Always have been, always will be, always learning. Every day is a learning day with my scanner. She's called Doris. So Doris is always looking over my shoulder, being my teacher. So I can be wrong briefly, but I'll only briefly until Doris sets me right. And then I'm always learning. So I am a learner, a runner, a coach. I have many tools. I'm quite old now. I have many tools in my toolbox, and one of them is our mutual love of anatomy, motion, joint mechanics, and how it all knits together. So that's me. That's Helen Hall.
Awesome. All right, I can go a couple of directions from here, but I want to ask you about the beginning. Why running? How did you fell in love with running? Was it something natural, or did you find it later in life? And after you started running, how did you decide to become a running coach and everything after?
Okay, so there was no decisions at any point. I didn't sit. The only decision I made was when I was 6 and I was going to be a meteorological observer in the Navy. That never happened. That was my decision. That was my path, and I never went there. I remember I was less than 11 because I was at junior school, and I wasn't allowed to run the mile because we were too young. So I walked the mile very fast, which seemed very inefficient. And then I went to senior school and we were allowed to run, but nobody else really wanted to run. So I wouldn't say solo in the cross-country team, but I was the one that ran around and around and around the school playing fields every lunchtime. And I was, back in the day, my freedom when I was a child was the 3 mile out and back loop down what is called back lane in the village where I lived. And I just started, I just ran. I ran because I wanted to. I just ran. It was I was free. So long as I was back by a certain time, I was allowed out to play, and it was my play. So I ran and I discovered stuff. I discovered that if I moved like this, it felt easier. If I moved like that, it felt less comfortable. If I did another thing, it would make my breath more arduous. And so I think for as long as I can remember, I have been looking for easier. How how far and how fast can I go most easily? So when I'm no sprinter, my husband, he doesn't think, he says that I have not got a fast twitch fiber in my body,
Hmm.
which may well be true, but I can keep going and going and going and going, which is what I do. I'm just back from an ultra multi-stage event where it was meant to be a marathon a day, but it ended up being 48 kilometers a day because we kept getting lost, and it was, there or thereabouts a marathon along the Jurassic coastline, which is like this. But when you know how to use your body really well, the one thing that humans do really well is keep going. We don't necessarily do fast very well, and lots of people get broken when they go fast. But in terms of keeping going, endurance is almost, it should say Homo endurance sapien,
Hmm.
because that's what we do. And so my passion is doing that keeping going thing as efficiently, as comfortably as possible, so that I can enjoy it as much as possible. I don't like pain. So 87 miles in the bag, over 3 days, job done, wonderful.
Awesome. That's something I probably I don't want to say I would never do, but it doesn't seem like something I'm willing to endure right now. But I know that you enjoy those long runs, and your body has been trained over the decades to operate like this. And I recently I'm trying, or not trying, but easily going into running because it hasn't been my thing per se. I challenged myself for that marathon I ran and walked, not only running but run and walk.
Well
Um,
done. But
yeah.
this is, sorry to interrupt. This, if I could deposit a little gem in the world of running, it would be that it's okay to walk, people. Why aren't people walking? Just to exemplify that, at the end of the last Ironman, where in Ironman, I don't know if everybody knows, but you swim 3.8 kilometers, you then cycle 180 kilometers, then you run a marathon, or you complete a marathon. And there's something called the Ironman shuffle, because everybody's really tired by the time they get to the marathon. So people are shuffling along, and literally they're like this. Oh, 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 oh. And and I have a strategy of walk run. And it may be that I'm so tired by this time I'm counting paces, but it doesn't matter. I am walk running, and I'm not known for my speed, and I'm often quite close to cutoffs. So, but it still doesn't matter because I can cover ground walking and running faster than the people who are just running because I am not fatiguing. So
Mm.
you bring up right at the very beginning, for me, the essence of the problem these days with run coaching. You asked about how I became a run coach. I've got no idea, but I just did. And it is, people think that they have to run. No, it's, you are powered by your 2 feet. It's just different gears. We have slow, medium, fast paced walking. We have slow, medium, fast paced running. It's just another gear.
Yeah,
So
it makes sense because, like, oftentimes I guess people are just like competitive like that, and in their head, I guess it feels like they're failing if they're not running, so they try to push themselves, and oftentimes they're not completing the race just because they get injured, as you say, because they don't necessarily change gears. Because if you only run on the fifth or sixth gear all the time, and then or only run on first gear all the time, trying to speed up, it's not going to work well.
exactly. And you can increase your average pace if you opt into a different gear, a slower gear, and it could so easily be walking because then you take the stress. Slow jogging is very hard work because you are still off the ground. Your body is still having to accommodate the impact of the landing. So it's still more intense, even though I'm walking faster than you jogging. the the intensity in my body is less. Two things: no impact, or a good half of the impact, and I am releasing the anti-inflammatory cells, the myokines, from my muscles whilst I'm walking, that you're not releasing whilst you're running. So the sports science has caught up with the what the ultra distance runners have known probably for a very long time, that a short walking break returns your energy. So you go back to your running. You haven't stopped. You haven't stood still. You haven't done anything apart from walk. You're continued your perpetual forward motion. And then you go back to your running and you feel more energized. You feel more energetic. Your pace picks up. So walking breaks, regular walking breaks, can so often improve people's average paces, not make them slower.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, now as you put it this way, I guess it sometimes comes more natural to me to, instead of like slow down the pace and do that light jogging, which you mentioned, it's hard work. To me, it does feel like hard work because I'd like to either keep when I'm running, keep a little bit of faster pace, because this way my cadence is not like too like heavy when I put my foot through the ground, and then walking seems to feel better. And then, as you said, I go and then I'm at the same pace after I take I catch my breath, and then my muscles are rested, and so on. So that's a great point. I actually never thought about this one. So gems from the very beginning.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's about it is also about the elastic sling systems, because if you are slowing your running pace down, you are spending more time on the ground. So as you mentioned, you're slowing your cadence down. But that doesn't just mean it's a slower footfall. You lose your momentum and your energetic recoil of your elastic bands going stretch ping, giving you free energy. You lose that into the ground. So as soon as running is laborious or painful or uncomfortable, walk, but walk briskly so that you are still stretching your slings for the energetic free energy of the recoil, and you are also still having the less impact. I wanted to, and the quick footfall. So the brisk walking is still the quick footfall, and you're accessing a full range of motion for the sling systems to be operative on their efficiency, free energy from the recoil action.
yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, and something on walking. I mean, I want to get into that as well, because you, as part of the anatomy in motion community and analyzing Gait, I'm guessing when a runner comes to you with the knowledge that you already have in your toolbox, you use that as initial assessment, because it's a bit harder to start with the running assessment right away. I mean, that's my guess. And since walking is the most natural and has the least impact, to me, it would make much sense that you start there, and then running is the next progression, because oftentimes people take running as something very natural for human beings, and let's say that this is natural, but from us being detached from our natural environment for decades now, working in offices and living a sedentary life, going out and start running as a hobby right away without addressing any deficits or without paying attention to the ranges of motion that your body has and the efficiency of the movement. And I treat this as a skill. So, and that's how I was able to prepare myself for the marathon, because I was checking different parts of my body, going through your book, checking how my thoracic movement is, what my wrists are doing, like where my muscles are being loaded, because I know my deficits. And if muscles were loading where I normally would suggest that they aren't, because of the deficits, because of the differences in in both sides of my body, and I was super happy. And but this is just like paying attention and spending the time. So I guess that's a good advice. I want to hear your take on it, but I guess that's a good advice on runners to slow things down in order to and reassess and take a little bit of time, regress in order to progress. What do you think about that, and how do you deal with clients like that? Because I know the runners, especially the ones I work with, they're ultra marathon runners, like trail runners. They go in the woods and they feel free, and their endorphins and like happy hormones are kicking in. And when they come in the gym, they're like, I don't feel like counting reps, and I don't want to do this, and it doesn't feel natural. And I'm like, all right, don't think that this is taking time away. This is actually helping you progress and become better. So how what is your approach with clients like that, and do you actually get clients like that? Because I don't know.
Oh, the A type, the driven, the pro, the semi-amateur, the amateur who is driven to the extent that it's not a good workout unless they are pushing hard. People who just want to lie on a couch and be manipulated into better. Yes, we are are all on the the spectrum of humanness with all of our impatience. And runners, generally speaking, just want to run. But of course, as runners, we all walk. There's not a single runner that doesn't also walk in their lives. So, and nobody I work with I've never ever met anybody who walks enough for their running. And if you're not walking well, I shouldn't say well, I should say if you're not walking efficiently, then you may not run efficiently. Now, I have, me and Doris, we've measured plenty of runners who run better than they walk. Their walking action is so awkward that they find fluidity in speed. But now, speed hides need, which is one of the sayings that goes in the anatomy and motion classroom. So speed hides need for sure. So they find fluidity in running, but now their feet are off the ground and they're landing on an itsy bitsy bit of a foot, which is then propelling again. So they're landing, controlling, and propelling. Yes, more fluidly than when they're walking, but now we have intensity added into the mix. So they may run better than they walk, but if they're walking inefficiently, then you're just adding insult to injury, which then continues the injury cycle. So, and I have the benefit of bringing people. I tend to find I bring people around to a more productive way of thinking because of the tech, because of the visuals. So I will measure people standing still, I will measure them walking, and I will measure them running. And of course, at every stage, everything should change. And things that stay the same generally suggest that either they're stuck there or that's the only option that their brain thinks they currently have. And I can point this out with the visuals, with objective data and say, look, you see, you're doing this here and here and here and here. And why? Why are you making this shape all the time? What is in your injury history that leads you to be there? And we need to unravel that little bit there so that then your body doesn't need to make that shape. And then we build you back up again. So through the walking process into the running. And often the running, often the walking will take care of itself. But it seems to me, in my experience, something that just slots into place between an input, a movement input, so a static drill of some description, will slide into place automatically in the walking gait, but doesn't take hold in the running gait. And it seems that the place where the running motor program, whatever that is stored, yes, they're linked, but they don't automatically flow from one to the other. And sometimes you need another little input, another little cue to help the person use that space that we now know is there in their walking gait to take into their running gait, to assist the process, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely does because, like, working with clients, I always tell them that if you go, as you said, and if they want to be manipulated manually by a physician or some other medical professional, and they test, retest whatever they do on the table, that doesn't necessarily transfer into like real life movement and walking and gait. And it also makes sense since like there are differences. They're related, as you said, but there are differences between walking and running because of the way you land your foot on the ground and where you strike and everything else. I mean, and the time that you actually spend in the air compared to walking and all those other subtle details. So, as you said, there might be small bridges that the body needs to cross and need those little tips. And it's interesting what you said about some of the best runner or some people are better running than walking. I actually have a few clients. One of them is a triathlete, and a couple of them are trail ultra runner marathoners. So those guys, whenever we've done drills on single leg in the gym, they're the wobbliest people in the gym. Like we will take like a regular disc job worker, and they'll do a lot better than those guys who sustain and endure so much over a triathlon or a marathon or whatever. And it's really fascinating and how the body is able to adapt based on the forces that you give. But as you also said, those people movement, and especially they hold tension, and it adapts and it has them going for a while. But once things start to break down, I mean, it's like a vicious cycle and starts like one after another. So it's like an avalanche of issues. And I see that the hardest thing or the biggest problem they have is in their spines. So their spines are super stiff. So they have more like extended spines, less ability to flex because like you need to stay upright and keep going and keep going. So they don't give their bodies like the time to rest and relax. So that's something out of my observation, out of a few clients, but you've worked with more, so you might have the same kind of like experience, I guess.
Well, yes, it runs the gamut of you name it. It could be anything. So, overly extended spines, too straight spines, inflexible spines,
Hmm.
or a big kyphotic flexion in the rib cage. And so this is the roadrunner meep meep, where the pelvis is
Hmm.
ahead and the rib cage is behind. So viewed from the side, the head and the rib cage and the pelvis aren't more or less stacked. They're off axis. And then, of course, so many wonderful running teapots where the pelvis has shifted over, and they're running with a hip for some reason,
Hmm.
and it might not hurt here, it might hurt here. So we need to, and we're understanding if it's a compression problem or a tensioning problem, locked long or squished. What is it? I've just finished working with a client who has just one side of her body just always in pain, one side, but the upper body was squished and the lower body was pulled tight, pulled open. She was pushing into it. So, but it was the root cause we hypothesized was one thing, was dental work when she was 11.
Hmm.
And her jaw has shifted, and the solution was nothing to do with the shoulder or the hip. The solution was with the jaw.
Hmm.
So you see everything. You see rigid feet and floppy feet and bow legs and knock knees, everything. You name it, you see it. You see Virgin London Marathon is a great example. 42,000 odd runners start. Let's say 40,000 runners finish.
Hmm.
Everybody looks a little bit different. So everybody is moving in a slightly different way. The thing that is similar is one leg is going in front of the other.
Yeah, and what you said about the the differences in people. I guess most people who come to you normally come with, and that's the case with the your client with the jaw problem that ended up the causing all the pains. I'm guessing people when they come to you, they come with like either knee problem, ankle problem, lower body problems, but as you go through the assessment, you find out that it's not always the case. I mean, not where the solution lies, but somewhere else around the body. So it's
Uh,
not.
Lower
It's not.
body and upper body. So lots of runners with shoulder pain. Go
Okay.
figure. So,
Okay.
they'll be running along and you'll see them and they'll be rubbing their shoulders because for some reason their brain has to have this shoulder close to the head. And the shoulder seems to be bossing the head around. And when you understand the anatomy, it's easy to see why that might be a problem. An elevated shoulder could well be a running problem on one side of the body. The other side is having an easy time of it relatively, and that side is having a harder time of it. But the it, running people come, yes, lower leg, yes, obviously it's common. But shoulders, yeah, lots and lots of running shoulder issues. And athletes, swimmers who are having issues, cyclists who are having issues, just people in pain really. And then every now and again, I'll find somebody will come along and they just want to find efficiency. They just want to run with more joy, enjoy it more, with more freedom of motion, more fluid motion. They want to run faster for less effort. You think, okay, and that's really my language. Just looking for that efficiency. Where am I inefficient? Where am I making it harder for myself? How can I make it easier for myself? And then they can go either faster or further or probably both.
Yeah, it's an interesting direction that I want that you're mentioning because um, nowadays the biggest percentage of people who come to me and my team are people who, especially for the one-on-one sessions, are people who have some sorts of dealing with some sort of pain. It doesn't matter what kind it is. It's not just like people who are recreational athletes, but just like office workers mainly. And the least of the people who come are the ones who actually want to improve on their craft. And it's really, for me, it's, I mean, I can work both ways, but it's really a different fascination of finding out ways to improve on something that's working well already, without any aches and pains, because there are different strategies when you work with pain compared to improving efficiency. It's still biomechanically, I mean, things work like similarly, but neurologically, and because of the nervous system and the chronic pain that they might have suffered or some injury they might have sustained, you might need to take it easy or play around a bit in order to find what your body is capable of tolerating at this specific moment. So, what is the percentage of clients that you get, which actually wants to just improve compared to the ones who come with pain?
Oh, so the ones who aren't injured, so they like 99% come in pain.
Hmm.
They can't do what they want to do. They've been told to stop what they want to do, which of course is not really a solution if you actually want to do it. Um, so that yes, the vast majority want to, unless it's a gift. So sometimes I'm a birthday present or a Christmas present, which is always so much fun. And the other half has they love their running so much. I'm going to go to this lady with Doris. I should put on the website actually that the scanner is called Doris, and go see if you can make it easier. So yeah, I don't have numbers on it, but I would say it's a good 99% of people come to me in pain. Sadly, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
it,
there's a
it,
lot of
it
pain out there.
yeah, it is. It is sad because we always talk about prevention and taking care of things while they're still not so bad or before you actually start experiencing any pain. But I guess it's like in our daily lives, which are super busy and hectic. It only comes to our mind when it actually the brain sends us some pain signals, and then some people even overcome that sensation and keep going until things really break, and then for most it takes quite a lot of time to recover, and it's demoralizing, I guess, for a lot of people. But I don't want to say I've given up, but I don't convince people. Like I still continue talking about prevention and improving on your performance, because this way, yeah, I mean, it's not that you can prevent injury. I mean, it can always happen, but at least it could be to a less extent, instead of like a broken ankle. If you step sideways, it might be just sprained or something like that. If you train in a smart way over time, because I tell people we don't do stuff isolated in the gym so that we just do it. It's no fun. We do it to become better in whatever activity we want to pursue. Like if you go hiking, if you go running, if you go swimming. I'm not right now. I'm learning how to swim, so I'm taking the same road in terms of like analyzing what my body's doing in the water and like trying to get better in this specific skill. And I think this is the for me this made a huge difference. Two things actually. One is actually changing scenery, because I found out that when I'm not running in circles, because I have a park that's like right next to my apartment. So I go out and run, but it's only 2.5 kilometers when you circle it around. So it gets boring. So the first thing
Mm.
when I started running was like changing alleys, going through the woods, and all those kind of things. But at one point, I went through all of them, so it became boring. But when I went to that Athens marathon, I thought it would be harder, but then it was super cool because it was not the same place, the scenery, and people were cheering on the side, and some people are cheering and supporting, and there were like funny characters like dressed up, and then all those sort of things. So it made the experience a lot more pleasant. And also the other thing is just approaching it, and then taking care of the bits and pieces, and just you work it as a skill. And I think if you want to improve on that should be your main attitude in the beginning. How many actually clients of yours are beginners, or do you get mostly like advanced people or people who have already been running?
I used to, before the tech, I used to get more beginners, but I think that a lot of people think, I get the messages that uh, people think that they're not good enough for this kind of analysis. And of course, all we're doing is being objective. That's all it is. Instead of it being an opinion, we have data. So it's relevant for all. Um, the A lot of people will begin by themselves, because how difficult can it be, right? Where everybody can run. We walked. I mentioned in the book that we walk the first steps, great applause, and then before you know it, new toddler is now trotting around everywhere, and nobody's even noticed the transition from the walk to the run.
Yep.
So, and the little kids, they buzz around all over the place. So yes, running around is in us. It's just normal. It's standard. And then people, I think that the problem, people, they create a problem because they then call it an activity. So nobody considers walking an activity. They'll call it hiking. Well, that's an activity. I'm hiking in furs. I'm going off into the hills and great blue yonder, and running means I'm putting on trainers and special kit, and I'm doing this thing. But when we're kids, we run around all over the place. We just run around. Uh, so in this world that we live in, we are in it. So we can't fight against it. We have time For work, we have downtime in which we might sit and watch TV, or we might get out and do whichever sport we want to do. And then it becomes this little microcosm, this nugget of time that is put aside for this. So here I run, or I cycle, or I swim, or I go into the gym, or I do my gymnastics, or whatever, or my horse riding, or my golf, whatever it might be. So then we go into these movements, which then really and truly, they should be skilled. They should be skilled. If we are sitting on our backsides for most of the day, I stand most of the day. So, but even if you stand most of the day, do it well, because you take whatever you do the most of all, and then you do your chosen activity with it. You don't morph into this different creature. You are the same being. And I think that whilst we hope to help prevent injury with better movement, the reality is, if we can get across to help people stop bumping into themselves, then we'll go a long way in terms of being the helpful creatures that we want to be as the coaches we are.
Yeah, but I think that is more of a mental and psychological game that we need to play with our clients, than the biomechanical and movement. Because I tell
Yes.
people that 85 to 90% is psychology, and everything else is the easier part. Because like you know how things are supposed to work, and exercises are there. It's just like first finding out the reason, and then convincing that person that why the things that he needs to do or she needs to do are important in order for improving their either skill or their general well-being. And but I think, as you said earlier, things get really stuck into dogmas and into those boxes about. You said you don't you stand, you don't sit, throughout your day. And I'm also like active, like in the studio, like moving around, showing exercises to clients, sitting mostly on the floor and stuff like that. But people are like, I work on a stand-up desk, so this is good for me. Or I have like the ergonomic chair, so this is good for me. And I keep telling those kind of like people with that mentality that the best thing you can do is actually change positions, not just get stuck in one. Because if you have the tendency on standing more on one leg while you're standing upright, this is gonna still load one side compared to the other, and you cannot be efficient either in the perfect chair or standing. Or that's why I normally advise him have a sitting desk, stand up desk, and sit on the floor. So you change positions, so your body doesn't get to adapt to a certain position and start forming comfortable or not comfortable but preferred shapes, which is then hard to get out of. And another thing about, because you use a lot of tools, another thing I wanted to ask you about, because nowadays gadgets, smartwatches, all sorts of like trackers and whatever tools are available to runners and athletes all over. And my notice is that people buy all of those things, but they don't know how to use them, just so that they will, just because they label themselves, I'm a runner or I'm a triathlete or this and that, and they start buying the tools, but the tools are not actually serving them in a way. Probably your tools are serving you, because with you find what people problems have, and then you work on those. Whereas with tools, we try to rely too much on tools and don't listen to this thing, to the biggest tool that we have, our body. So, what's your take on that, and what's your experience with tools and clients and that mentality?
Yeah, so I've assessed many a runner who runs like this, because they run with their wrist at the ready to check the Garmin, whatever wrist attire that they've chosen, um, because they become attached to the data. So I love data. Uh, I love collecting data, but I collect it and look at it after, curious as to what it's going to say, rather than run to data. So I have a big problem with heart rate monitors, the traditional heart rate monitor around the rib cage. Every girl I know has the issue about having sports with bras that are tight and the tightness around the rib cage. So to voluntarily put another contraption around the rib cage is deeply unpleasant. There are now, so this has a heart rate monitor on the wristwatch. So many of them do now. And there's a new one that comes out here, which apparently gives you heart rate. The collection of the data is valuable, but it needs to be married to the sense, the perceived effort and the sense within yourself. I have seen athletes who are trying to qualify for the World Championships, triathletes in transition, trying to pair two gadgets together and spending longer than me in transition trying to pair. They've trained so much harder than I've bothered because they're pushing themselves, and they've just lost all of that time trying to pair gadgets because they're actually scared to event, to race without them because they rely on them. So I encourage, if people want to collect data, fantastic, collect the data. But don't be a slave to it. Be curious as to what it's telling you. Does that elevated heart rate marry with the fact that you didn't sleep well that night, the night before? Or you've got quite a bit more stress at work, or you've just had a row with your kid or your other half, or you've got some background worries going on, or you ate something that didn't really quite sit well. Just marry it to something. It's not just a number by itself. It is only of value if it's in the context of something. So what is this data that you've just pushed out in the context of? People talk about a PB. A PB what? So is it the same distance? Is it the same weather conditions? Is it the same season? These PBs, people will go to a fast race to get a PB marathon, but that PB is in the context of that course and with that weather. So it's just the context that I find people are missing. So I encourage noticing the context. I encourage gathering the data, but I also encourage being free enough and competent enough to work without the data and to occasionally dare to not collect it and just be free. Just move without the data and see how it feels so that you don't rely on it. If you don't have the data being collected, there is suddenly this self-reliance on you noticing. It's like being a passenger in a car. If somebody else is driving, you know you're going to get to the destination. Suddenly, if you're driving, you've got to be more aware of what's going on so you don't take a wrong turn. So without the comfort of data collecting gadgets, you then become more self-reliant on how you're feeling, what your body is doing, and you just generally get better at noticing stuff. Because unless you notice stuff, how are you going to change anything?
Yeah, it's a great analogy that you did with being a passenger in your own body. It's a great example. And as you said, I keep telling people, especially with the ones who come with pain, if, for example, I'll use the lower back. If you're not able to use your lumbar spine or to flex your lumbar spine, your body pretty much doesn't have awareness because there hasn't been much movement down there. So for the body, that zone, that area is not recognizable. So the more awareness you give it, the better the experience and feedback it's gonna have. And the feedback, it's not from the watch or from the heart rate monitor or whatever, it's from your own body. And I know that, as far as I remember, you've probably done it multiple times, but I remember one of your stories that you ran a marathon, the whole marathon, just nasal breathing, and you had like diaphragmatic soreness after that. How many people have actually tried doing that and paid attention to their breathing, instead of just like using a smartwatch or whatever monitor for their heart? So that's another skill you can improve on,
Yeah.
and you just have to pay attention. And going to another topic, which is either pro or against, is the barefoot running and barefoot walking, and barefoot shoes are the plus, or not the placebo, but they're the one solution for fixing everything. The same thing I tell people: you don't try to make better choices for your shoes, but don't become a slave to the shoe. Because I keep telling people that have been wearing barefoot shoes for a couple of years now, and they still have issues here and there through their feet. I tell them, uh, just by wearing the barefoot shoe, you're not gonna be mobilizing the foot necessarily, because if it needs to move in a certain way and cannot access those ranges, the barefoot shoe is not the solution. So try to teach the foot, or whatever, the knee, to coordinate the hip and everything together, and not just the shoe. So what's your take on barefoot shoes? Because I know a lot of people, when they transition, they read the Christopher McDougall or somebody else, and they transition right away, and they're not ready for it, and they get hurt. So I'm guessing you would tell them the same thing I tell them, to progressively overload, just like with any other discipline, if you train with weights and all those kind of things. But what's your approach, and what's your take on that?
Well, of course, I wrote the book even with your shoes on, right? Because I was known as a barefoot runner. Um, and it's not about the shoe. It's just not about the shoe. So hence the title of the book. I have the ice conversation ice melter of being the first barefoot Iron Woman. Barefoot being an oxymoron because you can't actually run it with bare feet. You have to have something on
Hmm.
your feet, but with a barefoot shoe, which is just a silly name. Uh, so I love moving with as little on my feet as possible. My feet are currently bare. They're always bare if they can be. But equally, I don't like uncomfortable feet or painful feet or cold feet. So we use a technology that we have created because we're smart and intelligent humans. And the event that I've just done, day one, I was in Vibrant Five Fingers, and it was lush. So the first 45 kilometers was gorgeous. My feet had a massage on a stony beach. And it was only the last 3 kilometers, which was awful, sharp, stony, flinty kind of rock that was just awful. Uh, and so the next day I was told, oh, it's a lot more of that on days 2 and 3. So days 2 and 3, I switched to the sole that I'd found that I could run in for when there's lots and lots of mud and I need a lot of grip. So I switched to those, and so my feet were fine. The the shoe, you're right. It cannot be the solution. The shoe is not the solution. The shoe just needs to be comfortable, and allow the. But as you say, in just the same way that if your lumbars don't flex, your brain doesn't really know them because they're not moving. If you're only using one part of your foot, the brain doesn't know the other part of your foot because you never use it. You think you do, and that's the problem. People think that they're using their feet because they can feel themselves on their feet, but then they come to discover that they're not using all of their foot, or they're using more of one part of their foot than another part, and end up with, for instance, a Morton's neuroma, which then gets chopped out with surgery because we remove it without discovering why you had a Morton's neuroma in the first place. And no wonder these things come back. I know somebody who wore out a titanium hip in 3 years. So if you don't address the reason why you needed surgical help in the first place, then the way that you're moving is probably going to remain the same or similar, or that place is still going to be overburdened. So it's not that shoes are good or bad, and it's not barefoot versus shod. It's about, can you find something that is comfortable? Can you find something that doesn't squish your bones together in any direction, top to bottom. Laces, runners, please loosen the laces. It makes me wince when I see people, they're doing up their laces, they're going and they're pulling on the laces and they're pulling down on the laces and they're just flattening their midfoot because they tell me that they thought that the shoe need to be held on tight to their foot. And then we have the people who run in shoes that are too short because they want to have smaller looking feet. And then we have people who are in shoes that are too narrow because it looks ugly when they see the broader toe boxes and they find it looks ugly. And so it's always, for me, it's lots of conversations about reframing what people's perceptions have become, because they perceive, not because it's their perception, it's like received perceptions from everybody else that tells them that big feet are ugly. And I'm thinking, I've got size 7.5, and which is big for a girl. This is great. I've got
Hmm.
plenty of space to land on.
Yes.
And you want those bones to spread. So let them spread. And you want the laces to be, yes, the shoe needs to hold on, but don't have the laces tight. Be comfortable. Have shoes that you can run in as if they're slippers. So you're not holding on to them, but neither are they gripping you. And Gary Ward has a nice phrase, and he says, don't let the shoe dominate you. And it's not even about you dominating the shoe. You should be best friends. Uh,
It should be symbiotic. It's
yes,
not like one over another.
yes. It's just okay. Which fits best? Which allows your 33 joints in your feet to move to their best of their ability. Maybe some aren't moving as much as others. Maybe there are a couple of bits of hardware in. Maybe you've broken a few bones. I've broken a few bones. I've got hardware, not in my feet. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We've got so much movement possibility in us that all of these little restrictions, we can find a way to use our body that gives us more without bumping into ourselves the more we notice. So be comfortable. And if you feel that the difference between the front of the shoe and the back of the shoe is verging on a high heel, I suggest don't run in them. If you feel tipped forward in your shoe with more pressure through the forefoot, so again, I get people telling me that they thought it was meant to be like that to encourage forefoot running. And you think, well, okay, I think it was actually for cushioning purposes, but these are in your body for whatever reason. These are pushing you onto your forefeet. Maybe the inventor, maybe because he touched down with his heel first, that big wodge of cushioning helped him or her to land without a horrible big impact through his heel bone. So if we go back to why they might have been there in the first place, and then apply that rationale to us, is that working for us? And luckily, there's enough choice out there. If you spend enough time noticing what your feet tell you about your shoes, what your body tells you about your shoes, you can make better decisions for your body and your feet.
What's your opinion on, since you were talking about shoes, when a person wants to run and wants to buy a running shoe, one of the fancy ones, they go to the running store and they normally have the analyze their gait or their running style and something like that. And then I haven't done it myself, but I know because I've had clients who come to me like that and told me the story. But and then they propose this or that type of shoe with that kind of like insole or arch or support or whatever. And I'm like, what's your take on? I guess it comes to critical thinking and not taking this piece of advice as the one and only. But what's your advice for people who are actually advised by store clerks to buy this and that shoe? What should their um, choices in that regard be?
So anything anti, if it has anti in front of it, I would run away. So if you're stopping movement, so it's anti-supination, anti-pronation. Okay, well, we want it all. Just be greedy. Have it
Mhm.
all. Please avoid limiting your movement possibilities. So the answer is easy. Avoid anything that says anti, which leaves you with neutral. So, yay, with a neutral shoe, you've got all the possibilities available to you. Is it comfortable? Walk around. When you step out, so lots of people buy online. I encourage you, they make it easy now. Buy several pairs. Walk around inside. The one that when your foot comes out, there's relief, send it back. If your foot comes out of your shoe, you've been wandering around and you actually don't notice a difference, that's the shoe for you. The shoe you notice least of all fits you best of all. If you don't limit your movement possibilities, you're maximizing your movement possibilities. And my little passion is just be careful of a big stack in the heel. Just be careful. Don't go as low as you can. Just don't feel that you need to have it there. So what feels most comfortable? It's a nice point to mention orthotics because many runners come having prescribed orthotics, having found relief through orthotics. But now they're stuck because they can't not have the orthotics. So we end up seeing people who have orthotics in their slippers because they can walk without pain provided the orthotic is there. But that's not really a solution because as soon as if you can't walk in your own bare feet in your house into the shower from the bathroom to the bedroom, then that's not really a full solution in my book. And if an orthotic has assisted you in terms of pain relief, then I would say give yourself a couple of weeks to figure out why. Why does that orthotic help you? Because if you leave it there permanently under your foot, moving it from shoe to shoe or just getting a whole spread, putting them into each and every shoe, whatever you've done to limit movement in a certain place, that area will die back in the brain. There'll be no movement there, so the brain will become less aware of it. It will send less resources to it, so there'll be less blood flow. Obviously, it's not atrophying, so we've got no blood flow. But we have this time frame, and I use the example of a broken bone to help me get the message across to people with orthotics. And I measure people with and without orthotics on the scanner because sometimes we can see why it helps. It blocks a movement that they have too much of and enables another movement plane to come out. But the question is, okay, why are you moving too much in that? Maybe transverse motion, it's blocking some transverse motion. Why? Why are you? We need to deal with that so you don't have to rely on the orthotic all the time. Anyway, I digress. Broken bone. So you break your forearm, it goes into a cast. 6 weeks later, they take the cast off and your arm is withered. It's all small compared to the other side because the muscles have atrophied, because they haven't been able to move. So they've become smaller. We don't wrap the arm up in cotton wool and say, oh, dear me, that's that. We take the cast off and go, oh, goodness me, look what's happened. We need to build that back up. We need to use it. And the orthotics, they're no different. You put something, you stop the movement of a joint, you will have ultimately less tissue because there's no demand for the tissue to be developed and strengthened and replenished with blood and resources. So by all means, embrace the technology of orthotics, but keep it short term whilst you figure out what the solution is. They're no nig. the godfather of orthotics, stood up on stage in front of the audience in January 2016, I think it was, and rescinded all 250 of his scientific papers because they said, well, we made a conclusion that actually we didn't really have enough data for. So they can work. Random, 50-50 chance they'll get you out of pain or not, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Is this what he actually said in that
Yes,
interview or
yes,
conference?
yes.
If you have,
I think
yeah,
you
if
can,
you,
I think you can Google it. I was sent it years ago.
yeah, I'll definitely need to share this with people because like 100% of the cases who come to me who have orthotics, they don't look for, or they haven't been advised to look for the problem, even if the person who sold them the orthotics is not certified or doesn't know what the reason is. At least advise them to look for the solution. Don't just sell them the crutch and leave them on with it, and then keep selling the orthotics. I'm not against the orthotics myself either, but as you said, if you're not able to squat, even if you don't have pain, if you're not able to squat into a deep squat, don't just like try to bypass it by elevating your heels or turning your feet out. Try to find out why. Like that's at least my approach. Same with orthotics, I guess.
I'm not against anything. Footwear, orthotics. If it helps, use it. There are so many people who have tools and they want to help. Everybody is just wanting to help. Um, but it's for me, it's about understanding why you need that help. And for some, so say there's always going to be those who need the orthotic permanently because maybe they have had some kind of trauma to the foot that can't be addressed. It's we're talking. I'm
But
going to.
those are super rare cases and
Yeah,
small
yeah,
percentage out of
yeah,
everyone.
yeah. But there's, I don't want anybody to complain to your podcast that you can make sweeping generalizations. And of course, all of these things came about because there was a need. So yes, there's a need and we can solve this problem with that tool, but we also need to be better thinkers, ask better questions, harder questions, questions that it's hard to find the answers for, but don't give up just because it's hard. Just keep asking the question. So before I had the tech, I would stand people on their orthotics and do the anatomy motion assessment, standing on the orthotics and off the orthotics.
Hmm.
What was better? What was worse? In an effort to understand why they helped. Because if they helped, great. So we discovered that the person was missing a seesaw of the pelvis and the orthotics enable and give it them back. Okay, can we enable the body to rediscover the seesaw of the pelvis without the assistance of something underneath the foot, which may be blocking something else at the same time as encouraging something else, which is invariably the way.
Yep. Great. Um, we've been talking for a bit over an hour, so I have one last question because I try to keep those within those limits.
Yes.
Um, I have recommended your book to everyone who I've had discussion with about running. So I guess that's a great resource for everyone who wants to get better and improve on their craft and start to find out how they can be more efficient while they run. And if even if they don't enjoy running, how maybe they can start enjoying running. But if you have like a couple of things, let's limit it to three again. If you have three advices to people in which you can distill in a few sentences, what would those be for both beginners and more advanced runners and athletes?
Easy. Walk more, notice more. That's the first two. Those are easy. Uh, and I would have actually. So there's a little running man on the cover. Because walking is such a theme, walkers could read the book and gain from it because it's the human gait, one foot in front of the other. It's just different gears. So all the drills could be used by walkers, not just runners, because runners are walkers. It's just 2 feet. And so the third thing would be, so noticing more just generally, but it's also being more quadruped. So I see people running with very few people I see running. I saw one in the Olympics last night. I watched the Olympic triathlon on playback, and there was one runner, English guy, Yi, beautiful runner. He was running so beautifully with 4 limbs, 4 limbs. And of course, these are elite. They're pro. They're all running with 4 limbs, but not necessarily as efficiently or as well as I feel that they probably could if they had a more awareness of what their arms are doing. So it's people think that running is all about their legs, and it isn't. It's about your everything. And we run, the coordination of the sling systems is the 4 corners of the torso. So walk more, notice more about everything, notice everything. And remember, you have a rectangle here, 4 corners. They are the sling systems of Gait. These are our innate efficiencies that make us the human efficient being that we can outrun a horse and a mammal. Because yes, we can sweat, but also we have these efficient sling systems that cross a big anti-oblique sling, shoulder to hip on one side, and at the back, shoulder to hip on the other, or shoulder to glute.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not paying attention to what your arms are doing, you are not running efficiently. You have to be aware of what your hands are doing. I see people, they look like they're pushing themselves forward, but they don't know they are. I see people running and they've got a thumb stuck up, and that's fine, but they don't know they are. Their brain has done that for a reason. What is their brain doing to say, okay, you have to run with your thumb sticking up? Is it because your big toe on that side can't extend? Is that doing the job of your big toe? Is that helping? So this limb is now doing the job of that foot. So now you're running with 3 limbs instead of 4. That is what if people just became more aware of their arms, not just their legs.
Yeah, and this is great advice again. But when you said easy, I thought, and you shared the 3 advices. It was like things are easy, but I mean, things are easy, but they're also hard.
Oh, easy for me to answer. Easy
Yes,
question. Sorry, my bad. It was easy for me
yes,
to answer the question. It was like, oh no, that's easy one, because yes, people don't walk enough, they don't notice enough, and they don't use 4 limbs enough.
yeah.
So I see on the ultra there were so many runners without poles, and you think they're known fondly as cheat sticks for a good reason. You extend the arm to the ground, and you are quadruped.
Mm.
It's efficient. We've been doing it for millennia. Humans have been using staffs and sticks and branches for millennia because it's more efficient. It's easier. It makes
Yeah.
for more joy.
It's funny because, like, when you mentioned the using the 4 limbs, I remember when I was walking at the marathon. I was from time to time I was checking my wrist deviations and all those kind of like sort of things which normally people wouldn't pay attention to. So yeah, it's like I can relate.
Good.
Awesome. So it was a great talk. I hope we can do this again, and hopefully I can get some coaching from you so I can get better at my learning my improving my skill because I consider myself a beginner, but I like to learn the skill efficiently from the very beginning. That's why I go to people who have more experience and to other coaches to learn from. So that make it more enjoyable and save myself the trouble and the hustle. So download their brains pretty much. So everyone who wants to learn more, I will share Helen's website and all her social media. So if you want to get the book and if you want to connect, I'm sure she'll be responding shortly. Um, yeah. Any final words?
Thank you for having me. I'd be delighted to help you with your running, continue to help you with your running after your marathon. I don't consider anybody who's run a marathon a beginner. Um, and nobody is a beginner runner either. It's just they're beginning in their skill, maybe, of running. But we just, it's another gear. It's just another gear, people. That's all it is.
Yeah, I have something in mind, 20K in my trail marathon in for November. So maybe we can work for
Nice,
that.
nice. Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on the podcast,
Thank you for having me.
and I hope to talk soon.
Yes, please.